is about 85,000 children starving to death, 10,000 new cases of cholera every single week, and the United Nations telling us that Yemen is on the verge of imminent famine, with the possibility of millions of people dying, all because of Saudi activities in that civil war. And today, what the United States Senate said in a very loud way, that we will not continue to have our military posture dictated by a despotic, murderous regime in Saudi Arabia, a regime which does not respect democracy, does not respect human rights, a regime whose leader, nobody doubts, was involved in the horrific murder of a dissident journalist in the Saudi consulate in Turkey, Jamal Khashoggi. And today, and it's a very important breakthrough, both progressives and conservatives have made a profound statement that 45 years after the passage of the War Powers Act, 45 years later, finally, the United States Senate has come together to use that authority for the first time and say that the responsibility for war, the constitutional responsibility for war, rests with the United States Congress, not the president, whether that president is a Democrat or a Republican. And I think the historical importance of today is not only moving the United States out of that horrific war, but is having the country see that their elected representatives are about to take back their constitutional responsibility on the issues of war, one of the most important functions that the United States Congress has. So I just want to thank my colleagues here and the many people at the grassroots level who have helped us pass this historical resolution. Let me ask Mike Lee to come up and say a few words.
Thank you very much. There is no decision that is more fraught with moral peril than the decision made by a nation to go to war. Wars are messy, they're ugly, they inevitably result in a lot of people losing their lives and a lot of other people being injured, maimed, a lot of other people being subjected to starvation and other physical and emotional privations of the deepest sort. For that reason, there's no more important or touchy or tricky decision that any government can make ever, anywhere, than to go to war. This is one of the reasons why our system of government was set up the way that it was. And one of the crowning, distinguishing characteristics between our form of government and our previous form of government, our London-based government, that we chose to separate ourselves from 2.5 centuries ago, is that under this system of government, our chief executive could not unilaterally take us to war. The King of England could do that. The King of England could do that without consulting Parliament. Under this system, no. Federalist 69 makes that clear. Alexander Hamilton explains that this is one of the things that makes our system different from theirs. Now, I understand there's some gray area. There's some overlap between where the presidential powers associated with being the commander-in-chief of the armed forces ends and where the congressional power to declare war begins. But for that reason, 45 years ago, Congress and the presidency came together and came up with the War Powers Act, coming up with a very practical, common-sense approach toward delineating the boundaries, the metes and bounds between these two powers. And they came up with it on very reasonable terms. Today, for the first time, we've taken the historic step of pushing back in the way that we are with this measure, and it passed. And it passed with support of not only Democrats, but also Republicans. As I view it, this is a decidedly nonpartisan issue. I believe this is an issue that should be, ultimately will be, even less partisan than it has been in the past. Look, this war is a great example. We've been involved in this war for the better part of 4 years. We got into it under the leadership of a Democratic president. The war has continued under the leadership of a Republican president. The fact is that when we make a decision to go to war, there is very good reason that we've entrusted that power. When we're putting American treasure, and even more importantly, American blood on the line, it is wrong to entrust that to one person. I don't care what that person's political affiliation is or political ideology is. It should never be in the hands of one person. And under our system, it is not and must never will be. It cannot be. We cannot allow that to be the case. These decisions have to be carefully debated and discussed and vetted in front of the American people under the light of day. That can happen only in the branch of government most accountable to the people at the most regular intervals, and that's Congress. As Senator Sanders said, I see this as not an end point, but a beginning point toward a broader discussion that we've got to have, a discussion that refocuses once again on the separation of powers between the three branches of government. Ultimately, this is not a Republican issue or a Democratic one. It's neither liberal nor conservative. It is simply American. It's been an honor and a privilege to be part of this effort with Senator Sanders and with Senator Murphy, with whom I've enjoyed working side by side. We've had an uphill battle, a challenging effort at every step of the way. And 8 months ago, when we had our last vote on it, we came away with only 44 votes. And we've steadily increased the support for that. And today we passed it. Thank you. Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Senator Lee. Senator Sanders, it's been a pleasure to work with you. Thank you for both of your courage to pursue this resolution at a time when it was vitally necessary. I think today is a watershed moment for Congress. We are reasserting our responsibility to be a co-equal branch with the executive in foreign policy making. It's a role that Congress has abdicated for decades. And what we showed in this vote today is that Republicans and Democrats are ready to get back in the business of working with a president, and sometimes against a president, to set the foreign policy of this nation. And that we can do it in a way that respects the gravity of the issue and is able to find bipartisan consensus. This vote has been in some ways 3 years in the making. The first time that we got together to propose a resolution to reorient our policy in the Yemen war was in 2016, when a group of us, including individuals here, suggested we suspend arms sales to the Saudi government until they ended their policy of targeting civilians inside Yemen. That vote got 27 votes in the United States Senate. Today we got 56, representing a broad bipartisan agreement. And as Bernie mentioned, we think that this is a watershed moment, but we also know there's a lot of work to come. Unfortunately, the House has rigged their rules such that this is no longer privileged for the next 3 weeks. I hope and expect that the House of Representatives will take this resolution up early in 2019, and with a substantial bipartisan majority today in the Senate, we've made it clear that we can pass this again, if need be, next year. I will lastly say that this resolution and this debate didn't happen in a vacuum. This morning, the two sides in the Yemen civil war announced a historic agreement in which a ceasefire was agreed to for Hodeidah and the surrounding area, and a massive exchange of prisoners was announced. Now, this is a small but meaningful deal. These are confidence-building measures. But I would tell you that the progress on the peace negotiations is not coincidental to this vote. The United States has said through the Senate that our support for the Saudi-led coalition is no longer open-ended, that we expect our partners to be partners for peace, not just partners in war. And the concessions that were made by the Saudi side in the negotiations this morning would not have happened if it wasn't for the pressure that the United States Senate put on those negotiations. So we still have a lot of work to do. But I don't know that there have been many days in my short time in the Senate that I've been prouder to be in this body. This is hard for the Senate to debate foreign policy. We're not used to it. We don't do it a lot. But hopefully this is a signal to the next Senate and the Senate after that we can get back into the business of helping the president set the foreign policy direction of this country and do it in a way that brings the Senate together in a manner that few other issues are able to do. So to Bernie and to Mike and to all of our other partners in this, I'm deeply grateful.
Thanks, Chris. Any questions on Yemen? Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, Senator, I got here late. I didn't get your opening remark. Could you tell us what you want America to know about this?
Well, this was, as Mike and Chris said, this was an historical vote because today we said to the world that the United States Senate does not want the United States of America to be participating in the horrific Saudi-led intervention in the Yemen civil war. We are not going to be a party to seeing millions of people starve to death in a war led by a despotic Saudi Arabian regime. Yes, sir.
You mentioned how momentum seemed to build for this in recent weeks, especially after a couple of briefings, first from Pompeo and Mattis, and then from CIA Director Gina Haspel. Can you talk a little bit about how this sort of moved in that way?
Well, I think two things. I think the media has, played up what is obviously very important, and that is that many members of Congress and the American people could not believe the cold-blooded, brutal murder of Jamal Khashoggi in a Saudi consulate in Turkey. That the leader of a country would actually murder a dissident in a consulate was something that was shocking, I think, to many members of the Senate and made a number of them begin to rethink our relationship to Saudi Arabia. But I do not want to minimize the fact that I think many of our colleagues are also looking at the horror of what is happening in that country. It's not just the murder of one journalist. It is the starvation of 85,000 children and imminent starvation of millions more. Do we really want to be a part of that process? I think the combination of those two factors, the murder of Khashoggi and the recognition of the greatest humanitarian crisis facing this world, kind of led us to the vote where we are today.
Are you comfortable with the way the president has handled the aftermath of the murder of Jamal Khashoggi?
I approach it differently. I approach the whole topic differently than he has. For our purposes relevant here, I'm focused on the war effort. As Senator Sanders said just a minute ago, this is not just about Khashoggi. It's about much more than that. What the Khashoggi event did, I think, was to focus on the fact that we have been led into this civil war in Yemen, half a world away, into a conflict in which few Americans that I know can articulate what American national security interest is at stake. And we've done so following the lead of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So what the Khashoggi event did was to demonstrate, hey, maybe this isn't a regime that we should just be following that eagerly into battle. So no, I take a different approach toward that than he does, but this is much broader than that.
But what message does it send the rest of the world when the White House, the President, the Trump administration is siding with the Crown Prince in the aftermath of this murder?
Yeah, that's a question that is appropriately directed to the President, not for me. I speak for myself from my role as a United States Senator, and that is focused on jealously guarding the power that is lodged in the legislative branch of government to declare war. That is significant, and that fight is worth fighting. It is an authority worth jealously guarding, not because of me personally or the three of us on the stand or the 100 of us in the Senate and the 435 counterparts we have in the House. It is important because it belongs to the American people. It is not to be exercised by one person ever.
To that end, though, Ken, I'd like to hear from all three of you on this. Can you talk about how this might affect other issues with AUMFs and other conflicts that the United States has been involved in, and if this sets the table to possibly addressing the 01 and 02 AUMFs?
Look, I think what we did today is basically say that the United States Congress, in this case the Senate, is sick and tired of abdicating its responsibility, its constitutional responsibility on matters of war. So I think what happened today is not the end. If anyone thinks, my goodness, this is the end of the process, you would be very, very mistaken. I think we have woken up the United States Congress to its constitutional responsibilities. There are a lot of issues out there in terms of foreign policy and military policy that have not been debated on the floor of the Senate or the House. And I think what today is about is the beginning of a new day in terms of the Congress acting on military issues and foreign policy issues.
I think a lot of people are scared of debates about military authorization because they think they will get out of control. They think that we will lose control of the debate on the Senate floor. I think it is important to see how this debate played out. This was an orderly debate. This was a debate where we had amendments that passed and we had amendments that failed. We were ultimately able to get to a conclusion in a way that, frankly, made everyone proud, even those that voted against the resolution. And so I think the manner in which we had this debate, in a very respectful way, in a very serious way, I think showed that we can do it in the future. I spoke to soon-to-be Chairman Risch, who voted against the final resolution, but voted to proceed to debate last week. And he said, "Listen, I thought it was really important for us to, have this debate." And I think we showed that if you put foreign policy questions before the Senate, even tough ones, like how we authorize future actions and present actions against terrorist groups, we can rise to the occasion.
Senator Lee, what assurances, what information have been given by the administration on the actual military conduct of the war in Yemen since the aerial refueling started? And what would you expect to see going into next year that would give you pause to bring this resolution forward again, or cause you to go ahead and want to bring it up a second time?
Insofar as your question is directed at whether I'm given pause in proceeding this by virtue of the fact that we're not currently doing mid-air refueling for combat missions, it doesn't change my approach at all, not even an inch. There haven't been any assurances that those won't resume. We're not doing them right now. To my knowledge, nobody has said those will not continue. Look, in this day and age, warfare involves a lot more than a single battlefield and lines of military personnel firing against each other with guns. There are a lot of aspects of modern warfare that involve cyber activity. And there are certainly a lot of aspects of modern warfare that involve reconnaissance, surveillance, target selection, and things like mid-air refueling. These are part of war. As long as we are involved in this war as a co-belligerent, which we are, and make no mistake, there is no ambiguity in my mind, and I've never heard a single argument from anyone in this administration, from anyone in the Senate or the House of Representatives or anyone else. When you look at the language of 50 U.S.C. Section 1547C, it makes clear the fact that in order for us to exercise this authority, we don't have to prove that this is necessarily just full-blown hostilities on our own. It is also sufficient if we are involved in accompanying, coordinating, and so forth with a foreign military power that is itself involved in hostilities, and we clearly are. So as far as I'm concerned, unless or until we withdraw from those hostilities, unless or until we stop engaging as a co-belligerent in this war, I'm going to keep pushing for it.
Maybe one last question. Anybody? Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.